everyone, and welcome back for another episode of The Bright Side of Life. I am your host, Melissa Bright, and today we are going to be talking about the fascinating topic of psychedelics. Today, my guest, Matt Zemon, is a psychedelic medicine expert, and he is also the author of Psychedelics for Everyone, a beginner's guide to these powerful medicines for anxiety, depression, addiction, PTSD, and expanding consciousness. So without further ado, let me bring Matt onto the show. Matt, welcome to the Bright Side of Life. How are you doing today?
I am doing really well. Happy to be here, Melissa. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I am very, very excited for this conversation because I feel like this has been a very, very popular topic in the last couple of years. For I guess me, for you have been doing this a long time. So you're like, I've just been doing my thing and now everybody else is catching on. Um, I want to ask you first, where does your story start in terms of getting even interested in psychedelics, this topic, things like that? Where does your story start?
Melissa, I fell into this kind of accidentally. I had some friends invite me. They had hired a guide to do a guided magic mushroom journey, and they
Okay.
invited me to come with them. And I was like, no, I didn't do drugs. I wasn't a big drinker, and I didn't sound like something I needed to do. And they said, no, you want to do this. And they convinced me. They said, you love to travel. This is like taking a big trip. You love to read. This is like learning about yourself. You really should do this. So I did it. And I'm so grateful because it completely changed the way I look and interact with the world. On that one journey, I reconnected with my mom who died when she was 49. I was 22. Um, I felt this incredible sense of love and safety and then realized in the very next moment that, oh my goodness, I don't feel safe and loved in my everyday life. And then I realized I was scared of dying, and I realized I was not as present for my family as I could be, and on and on and on. And from that one experience, I made massive life changes. Went back to school, got a master's in psychology and neuroscience and in mental health, and just trying to figure out, how do psychedelics work? How do they work for me, and how can I use them as part of my learning, healing, and growing moving forward?
Yeah. Wow. So how long ago was that trip? Was that
Just
journey?
Yeah, it's just about 5 years, not that
Oh
long.
my gosh.
Hmm.
Man, you have been busy for 5 years.
Super busy. I've got just a whole new set of energy. Now we have this in common, Melissa, right? You lost your mom in your mid 20s.
Yep. Yep. I lost her when I was 25 to COPD, chronic
Okay.
obstructive pulmonary disease from, I'm assuming, smoking.
Yep.
And just really quickly to kind of give a little bit more to the story, hers was especially hard on me because I had my daughter at 16.
Mm.
And so when I lost my mom, my daughter was 10. Going into teenage years, I just lost literally like, the biggest support system. Not trying to say like, oh, why this is worse, but it really had a deep impact because I lost everything. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit backstory to that.
Yeah, that's a big backstory.
Yeah.
It sounds like you and your mom were very close, and it sounds
Hmm.
like emotionally you were close, and sounds like physically she was a big part of your support structure.
Yes, that's exactly. And then when, you lose that,
Oh.
so much goes out the window that you don't
Hmm.
even realize. I think the biggest surprise that I really happened to me is my self-worth and self-trust throughout the years just went out the window because as much as I thought I had my shit together as a 25-year-old, well, when you lose your mom, you will really quickly realize that you still have many, 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 many things that you need to ask her about life in general. Um, so just guiding life without her is like, I've tried to give the analogy of like riding a bike. Your training wheels are just off and you still don't know, like it's still shaky. Um, I feel like that was the most surprising thing in my life was like self-trust in myself really, really went out the window.
It's totally understandable. What's your relationship with your father?
Well, he has since passed also. He passed in 2021 and it didn't really exist.
Hmm.
Um, once my parents divorced, whenever I was in kindergarten, he moved to a different state. And then it was kind of the obligatory, I'll call her on the holidays, I'll call her on her birthday. If I'm in town for hunting season, I'll call
Mm.
her because I'd be an asshole if I didn't. Um, and that was about it. So when I lost him, it was a different type of grief because I grieved what I would never have back with him. And he had just moved back to Missouri, retired, 2 hours away instead of being 12 hours away. Um, so yeah, that was a whole nother grieving process. So now I'm navigating this life at 38 years old without either parent, and it's hard.
Yeah, it resonates with me. My father died when I was, what was I, 19? So before my mom, but he was, we were close but different. He was, they were divorced, and
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have that frequent of discussion. So it was sad,
Yep.
and it was shocking, but it was not, it wasn't the same. When my mom died, it was like I now know what the low end of my emotional register is. I talk in my book about wailing and feeling like these impossibly large tears and this hole
Mm,
being ripped into my heart that I carried
yeah.
for decades. And that sense of, okay, it's that it's the I miss being able to pick up the phone and talk to her. I miss the I am sad for the things that never were. She'll never get to see
Mm,
my kids get married. She'll never get to I can't ask her the questions that as an adult I have. And that,
yep.
yeah, those are things that are yeah, that are deep and deeply sad that I'm again super grateful for psychedelics on this part of the healing process for me, to be able to have another a reconnection to on
Yeah.
this journey. I was able to kind of pull a string from her to me to my kids and be like, oh, we are all connected. She's just in this other place. And to feel it versus being told it, two
Mm,
different things, Melissa, very, very different.
okay. So if we can can we dive into that journey of
Sure.
there is somebody that I know that I'm very close with that has also reconnected with his mom during, I
That
think it
journey.
was mushrooms, I
Okay.
think. Anyways, and it really opened his eyes. So can you kind of give in description like what it is that happened when you reconnected with her and you said, you knew now that you had this string and you knew she was just somewhere else. What's going on in your mind? Like, give me all those details so I can understand because I've never done this. I guess we'll caveat that. I've never done
You
any
have
kind of
no
drug
psychedelic
besides weed.
experience.
None.
Okay.
Zero zip
And weed
zilch.
is and cannabis is very, very different.
Yeah.
Like I know for me, I've only done cannabis a handful of times. I don't like it for me, not saying
Right.
from any judgment of anybody else, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't like the way it makes me feel. Psychedelics are a different drug.
Okay.
So going back to this journey, I actually made back up. When my mom died,
Mm-hmm.
I gave up on God. I was like, I don't believe that there in God, period. How could this happen? And and lived with that. So we raised our kids in a Unitarian church, so they would have structure and they would have community and they would learn about the major religions.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't believe that there was um, anything out there.
Right.
Um, on this journey, immediately I could understand how there is room for all sorts of spirits to live. And I was like, okay, I was just wrong, and that's silliness. And then that tied into kind of my fear of dying. Of
Mm-hmm.
if I don't, if I stop thinking of myself as this is it, this is my 100 years on earth, and I think of
Right.
myself as a spiritual person with a much longer span of life, having a human experience, it feels
Yep.
different. And
Yep.
and I could it just okay, that all kind of made sense. Um, when so you asked what does it feel like?
Mm-hmm.
Mushrooms for me feel like kind of waves of vignettes, where you're learning something or you're seeing something for some period of time,
Yeah.
and then it kind of you get kind of a break. You hit a plateau. It's like, okay, ooh. And then all of a sudden another wave comes and you're somewhere else, or you're feeling something else. And then you go down that for a little while. And it just over and over. For those who are not familiar with mushrooms, it's about a 6-hour journey when you do a large dose.
Oh, jeez.
And again, for someone like me, I'm a control freak. That's part of why I don't drink that much, or didn't drink that much. So I like things the way I like things.
Yeah.
So to agree to give up control for that period of time was probably the hardest thing for me to do.
Hmm.
Um, but with a guide who said, I'm going to prepare you for this. So let me actually back up. Johns Hopkins talks about source, set, and setting. So source is, where did your medicine come from? Do you know what you're taking is safe? So I felt, okay, I know what I'm taking is safe.
Okay.
Set is your mindset. So the guide said, okay, what's your intention? What are your resources? Do you know how long you're going to, this is about this long of a journey? You know who's going to be there. Are you in a good mindset space? Okay. So I felt good about that. And then setting is your physical environment. And in this
Okay.
case, we had control of the house. We had control of the music. I knew exactly who was there. We weren't worried about dogs or kids or any of that type of interruptions
Yeah.
or loud noises. And when those three things are taken care of, the probability of having a good experience can be challenging, but good experience is really, really high. And
Okay.
all those things are taken care of for me. So yeah, I felt really I was in a container that I could do this work and then
Okay.
emerge from it. I think and I'll stop talking here, but the only other thing to just get out for your listeners is psychedelics aren't a cure for anything. They are a catalyst, or they are an insight. They are a spark. They are a remembrance of who you are, or who you were, and who you were, and it can remind you that there's other ways to think besides how you possibly think right now. And then
Mhm.
with that knowledge, and that knowledge as a visceral feeling versus just a lecture or a lesson, you can then move forward with your life and make whatever change you want to make.
Okay. I like that you pointed that out because so with that, like you saying it's just kind of a catalyst. Would there need to be or can there be other experiences that, you can do it multiple times throughout your life if whatever because you want to or because you another major event happened and you want to I don't want to say pull yourself out, but something. You can do other stuff to kind of get the same feeling back. Does that make
So,
sense?
yeah, of course, a couple of things with that. So, a lot of people meditate, as an example. I was an awful meditator. Um, Psychedelics showed me what's possible with meditation, so that when I now meditate, I have something to aim for. And
Okay.
it's again different than what a Sam Harris app would tell me to do when I'm meditating. It's just I can feel differently where I'm aiming. As much as I know you're not supposed to aim when you're meditating anyhow, but I think we can all understand we can hold both those things together.
Yes.
Um, Holotropic breath work. There's lots of breath work things you can do that are not medicine. And again, having a non-ordinary state of experience background can
Mm,
help kind of understand where you're aiming for on the breath work
okay.
ideas. Personally, I think when it's for spiritual, so there's let me sorry, one more thing. The medicine, psychedelics, people come to it for different reasons. Some people say, I want a medical experience. I want to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety or PTSD or OCD or eating
Mm,
disorders, whatever. And I
yeah.
want to go to a clinic and I want a doctor to prescribe it. And I want that experience. And that's beautiful and that's great and that's important. And all sorts of good things are happening in that world. So let's hold that as a one.
Okay.
And other people say, hey, I'm an adult, and no adult should tell another adult that they can't put nature in their body and everything should be decriminalized.
Hmm.
Okay, I get that. I respect that. And nobody should tell me that you have the right to tell me why or why not I can take nature. Okay,
Right.
that's bucket number two. And then bucket number three is a spiritual path where people say, look, for thousands and thousands of years, people have used psychedelics to connect with their higher powers. And different cultures have used different psychedelics based on what's available to them.
Yeah.
So here in America, I want to practice my religious freedom in a country that was founded on a religious freedom. And I want to use a psychedelic to connect to a higher power. And I don't want to talk to anybody about how depressed I am or how anxious I am. I just want to do my journey and have my connection. I think for those of us who practice psychedelics with that intention, I think many of us do psychedelics more than once in a lifetime.
Right.
Some of us it's once a quarter, some it's once a year, some once every few years, but it's because it's an ongoing spiritual practice.
Okay.
And I think that's okay too. But all three, it's an and. All three models need to exist together in this country. And that's kind of the point of my book. I don't mean everybody, my book's called Psychedelics for Everyone. And I don't mean everybody should take a psychedelic, but I want people to read this book and decide whether it's right for them, whether
Yep.
it's right for someone they love, or whether it just changes the way they vote and think about these tools that are that again have been used for millennia.
Yeah. That's such a good point because I feel like I would fall under the second category,
The
the
decrim
medicine. Well,
or the
just
medicine one.
like I mean, I've already been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, which hasn't really been an issue in my life since I've started like meditation and breath work.
Mm-hmm.
But my ex-boyfriend really, really, really wanted me to experience mushrooms really bad because he knew like just how hard my mom's like losing her was. And he's like, this can do amazing things for you. Um, Different mindset, seeing whatever. And so I think that's what I would want to happen is because am I depressed now? No. Do I have anxiety now? No. But I do have an intention for it. And it would probably lie in the category of something with my mom, like connecting with my mom, maybe both my parents. Can you go in with intentions like that or no?
It's a yes and. So what we talk about is in advance, we highly recommend people write down different intentions. I actually have a book
Mm,
called Beyond the Trip, which is a preparation and integration journal where it takes people through different prompts for the intention setting process. Um, so yeah, people are definitely highly encouraged to come in with an intention and then right before the ceremony to throw it out the window and to enter the ceremony with no expectations. So you've told yourself, yeah, I want to, I'd like to reconnect with my mom, or I'd like to have a chance to experience that love, or I'd like to tell her something, or I'd like to feel her again. And all that's a
mhm.
beautiful intention. Um, and maybe that happens for you, maybe it doesn't. But
Right.
but maybe then the better or another way of phrasing that would be, how do I move forward without you?
Mm,
And that's a little bit broader. And that could lead to another connection, but it could also lead to an insight into the dynamics between you and your daughter. It could lead to dynamics of you and your partners. It could lead to a how
yeah.
are you showing up every day? What do you do for your resource creation? It could lead to a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's again we talk about how the medicine's going to show you what the or the sacrament's going to show you what the sacrament needs to show you. Um, but in that every journey is an opportunity to learn, heal, and grow and connect.
Okay. So let me give you an example of, so you said control freak. I'll just go
Hmm.
ahead and identify myself as a control freak.
We have a lot in common, Melissa. You see this here.
Are you a Leo?
I'm a Cancer.
Okay. Well, we don't have that in
We
common.
don't have that in common. No, no.
You said let go of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that. Not that I would be sad, but I have been told that I have expectations. And so I want to ask you two things. And we said that we were going to talk about this on the podcast. So we'll just go here for now.
Let's do it.
Um, I have had several experiences with marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
I have never smoked it a lot, except for in 2021. It was finally legal in Illinois. And so I'm like, why don't I give it one more try? This is after a really bad experience of it was really bad. Like super paranoid about like my ex-boyfriend like gonna harm me or something. Totally crazy. And he's like, okay, well, we're here with a whole bunch of people. You should be fine. And it was fine. And everything was fine for 4 months. Well, then I smoked because I was having really bad anxiety, which I know don't smoke when you have anxiety. So then what happened that night was I had a really, really bad, terrifying thought of I'm eating cereal. My dad died basically from a whole bunch of like heart complications of not taking care of his teeth. I was diagnosed with periodontal disease. I'm eating and I have the thought, and I am going to bring up thoughts of suicide. If you're so scared of dying, Melissa, then why don't you just do it yourself? Was the thought that I had. And then the next very thought was, will you have a gun in your room?
Mm.
So then my thought was, something is going to happen. Oh my God, my thoughts are so powerful. I'm either going to go get my boyfriend out of the shower and tell him that I'm having this thought, or I'm going to go in the bedroom. I don't want to, but my thoughts feel so powerful. I was able to come down from that. But then 2 weeks later, I'm basically having PTSD and these intrusive thoughts will not stop. Completely sober and they won't stop. So basically after that, I said I was never going to do it again. I did do it again. Same thing happened. I'm thinking I'm going to harm myself or I'm going to harm somebody else. So my question to you is, I do have a history of bipolar in my family. My mom was bipolar. I don't know if it was one or two. Could somebody like me, if you know what that is and what happened to me, could somebody have an experience with psychedelics and that not happen?
Okay. You just covered a huge range of topics. So I want to unpack a little bit of this. So, right, you're in your 30s now? Is that what you told
Yeah,
me?
38.
Okay. And you have never been diagnosed with bipolar.
Mm-mm.
Okay. I want to go back to the suicidal ideation for a second.
Okay.
Before these experiences, before 2021,
Yep.
did you have suicidal thoughts? Okay,
Never.
perfect. And then
Never.
just on these two times,
Yeah.
and you identified him, and then you identified him, you were aware of them, and then they moved through. Is that correct?
Kind of. I mean, it was really, yes, they did move through when I was no longer under the influence. It wasn't
Okay.
like,
Yeah.
but then for a second I had PTSD because I'm like, what the hell was that? I literally went to the hospital because I was having these intrusive thoughts. And they're like, and that's the day I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And I told them what happened. And I'm like, I can't stop these thoughts. They won't stop. Anyways,
The
so no.
suicidal thoughts is what you're talking about back then.
Yeah. And I don't want to harm myself like at all. Uh, that
Good.
that's what but they kept coming into my mind that I did. It was like not hearing other voices. It's not somebody else
Mhm.
telling me this. It's just my thoughts. So that's your answer.
Okay. The
Okay.
so cannabis there's so many different strains, and the what's happening is the balance between the THC and the CBD is shifting to make the highs higher.
Mm,
And with that, for the first time ever, we're seeing people having psychotic breaks with cannabis. We're seeing people have violence with cannabis. It almost should be called something different than weed, because it is different. These strains are much, much, much stronger than they used to be.
yeah.
And it sounds like, for whatever reason, whatever strains you had,
Hmm.
um, impacted you. Certainly right when you were on the influence, but then it held on for a couple weeks.
Hmm.
Um, and I think what you're asking is, if that happened with cannabis, could that happen with psychedelics? And I think you're taking it another step further and you're saying, and with a family history, is this something I should be concerned about?
Yep.
So I'm going to do my best to answer, but I always direct people to the spirit pharmacist, a guy named Dr. Ben Malcolm, who have very specific medical questions. I think Dr. Ben is a PharmD, so he's a pharmacist who specializes in psychedelic pharmacology.
Okay.
And you can go to his site and you can book your own medical consultation with him, and he'll look at your past medical history. He'll look at every prescription you take, your supplements, your mental, and your whole background. And then
Yeah.
he will give a not trying to sell you anything. He'll give you
Yeah.
a feedback on what's safe, what's not safe, and how to, or actually safe isn't even the right word, where risks are reduced and where there might be risks.
Okay.
So there's a lot to unpack in your question, Melissa. So bear with me here. So you asked about bipolar as part of this. Researchers It's
Okay.
hard to research psychedelics in America, so much so that the research that's done, for the most part, exclude not only if you have bipolar, but if any one separation of bipolar exists. So there's not a lot of research on
Okay.
psychedelics for people with bipolar histories, family histories.
Okay.
That being said, Dr. James Fadiman talks about this. Dr. Ben talks about this. There are plenty of people who have bipolar who take psychedelics.
Okay.
They typically don't do it, should not do it when they're in a manic state. But
Mm.
there's plenty of people who do it. For particularly young people, and I'm talking like 19 to 25, if you have a family history of bipolar, of schizophrenia, that might be a dangerous time to experiment with psychedelics because that's the age where it's most likely to present. And maybe it's been presenting as depression or something else during those periods.
Mm-hmm.
And with the family history, it's just again something to be careful of, um,
Okay.
and to think about. 38, you haven't had any history of this. It feels like, and you're not, do you experience great manic and depressive
Mm-mm.
period? Okay. So you're not exhibiting bipolar symptoms.
I don't think I've ever. No.
Yeah. So again, it doesn't, I, I, I would imagine that, that you would get a pass of, yeah, the risk is pretty reduced. I think this is probably a good place just to talk about risk in general.
Let's do it.
All psychedelics, all drugs have risks. You can overdose on Tylenol. So when we talk about keeping you safe, we're really talking about reducing risk. The study I point people to all the time is Dr. Nutt's study from Imperial College London, where he said, let's forget how drugs are scheduled and just look at the harm to self and harm to others that these drugs can do. And on the far left hand side of his chart, the most harm to self and others is alcohol, 73 in his chart. Heroin is like a 55, crack cocaine is like a 54. So the amount of harm that alcohol can do to yourself and to others is significant. The far right hand side of his chart are mushrooms. It's a 6. I think LSD is a 7, and I think MDMA is a 9. So,
Damn.
are there risks with these different psychedelics? Of course, there are. But if you are intentional and you pay attention to your source and your set and your setting, the ability to use these medicines for, as we talked about, spiritual connection or depression, anxiety, OCD, on, on, it's all very
Right.
doable. Um, did I answer your question? There's
Yeah,
so much to that, Melissa.
I
And I'm
know.
glad that you are not experiencing those feelings now. And I'm glad that you've said I'm not going to do this particular medicine because it gave me this experience. And I'm
Yeah.
glad that you had a support system that did not let you take action on those.
Yes. Yeah. And I think because I do have people in my life that do psychedelics and have told me how great it is. And I'm like, I am all for it, but I have to know that I am not going to experience what I experienced with weed because that sucked. And so I'm also a little bit sad when you talk about the set, like my mindset. There is going to be a little bit anxiety already because of my experience with that. And I wish I could separate it. My ex-boyfriend, he's like, I just wish I could show you like how different weed and whatever is. Um,
I think that's
so
not, Melissa. I think that is that's putting additional pressure on yourself. I'm going to encourage you not to worry about it. I'm going to encourage you to just embrace it for what it is. I've had
okay.
this experience with cannabis. I did not enjoy it.
Yeah.
I've now, for whatever reasons, I'm finding my way to XYZ psychedelic. And yeah, I'm going to go into this knowing that I did not enjoy cannabis. And I'm also going to recognize this is not cannabis and it's going to go where it's going to go. But I don't,
Yeah.
I think when we try to tell ourselves, I should not, that's hard. It's harsh. It's
It's
not what our body's telling us. You are smart. You have an inner wisdom, and your body is telling you, I'm nervous. And that's okay.
yeah. Ooh, that's a good point. Because the inner wisdom, like, what if the inner wisdom, like, what if I did a psychedelic and the inner wisdom was like, it's all fine. You had nothing to worry about.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens, right? The expanded consciousness.
I believe it is. I believe that many people see that they are loved, that they are enough, that they're beautiful, that they don't need anyone on the outside's opinion on those matters, and that things are and always will be okay. It can be challenging. It can be sad. It can be the full emotional gamut that we experience as humans, and it can still be okay. Um, and that's quite beautiful.
Yeah. You mean the trip itself? You can have that experience with all that?
I mean, you as a human
Oh,
can have all that,
yes.
um,
And
and
have.
you can know all that, and have had all that.
Yep.
But but I think knowing that you cannot fail, which is one of the things I think psychedelics often shows you. You're just learning, healing, and growing until you're not. So, okay, I had a challenging experience or had something that did not go, the task did not resolve the way I wanted it to. That doesn't mean I failed. It means I learned something and I'm going to take that to the next moment in life. But these are all just a collection of moments that we're learning in and moving forward.
So true. And I've learned a lot of this, like self acceptance, forgiving, all this stuff. But then, of course, you have those other things that stick around for a little bit longer. And that's a good point. If my ex boyfriend heard this right now, he'd probably be so pissed because he'd be like, really? But I've always said, like, it always helps to talk to an expert. I would love to talk to an expert than just somebody, like I'm very much, I need, like you said, the studies. Well, now that I know it's like at a 6 on the, like risk and alcohol that I consume quite often is at a 74. Okay, well, the,
It
the,
is
the
it's interesting. One of the things that the other thing that comes up is how much we give up our agency. So when we're kids, we're taught give it up to the parents, give it up to the doctors. Our doctors are a high priest in our society.
right,
And I think another thing that psychedelics do for a lot of people is it's okay, wait a minute. I don't I know it's right for me for in certain things, in many things, especially spiritual matters, especially emotional
yep,
matters.
yep,
And I don't really need to talk to another expert. I know it's right for me. Now I might not be able to do it, or I might find
right,
myself blocked, but I know. Um, and that's powerful.
yeah,
It can go too far. And there's a thing called psychedelic narcissism. So it can go too far. But but again, and that's where I think integration, and you talk about people in your life who support you.
hmm,
Um, when you have people in your life who can support the psychedelic journey and help you unpack, these are the things that came up. These are the things that I want to do. This is what I'm thinking about. And they can say, oh yeah, this is wonderful. And I can remind you of these things. Or Melissa, hang on for a second. This feels a little bit too far.
right,
That's good too. So having that
yeah,
support system in place is helpful.
that's very true. I so I want to talk to you about I know in one of your interview questions the microdosing. I want to ask
Mhm.
you like would is there a preference to like should somebody do like a full on trip first to see what that's about or should they microdose? What are the benefits of microdosing?
You're doing all the
Selfishly
questions.
asking for myself.
Uh-huh. I see that. um, okay. So let's first define what microdosing is. And then
Yes.
so microdosing is when you take a tenth to a 20th of a traditional dose. So it's a very small amount.
Okay.
It's either described as subperceptual, meaning it's so small you don't even feel it or you're not aware of feeling it, or
Mm,
subintoxicating, so small that you can still function, but you're not intoxicated. You can talk to your kids, you can work, you can do all those things.
right.
Um, and most people, when they talk about microdosing, are talking about mushrooms or LSD. And
Okay.
I'd say most people are really talking about mushrooms just because they're so much easier to get. Um, some people start with microdosing. That's their toe in the water. And they want to and there's many reasons people microdose. Most commonly, they'll say, I want to use it for depression or anxiety. I want to do it for creativity. I want to do it for connection. I want to do it for connection either to the earth or connection to a higher power. That's why I want
Mhm.
to microdose. Okay, great. Um, the research is split. Some research says this works. Amazing. And other research says it's a placebo. Doesn't make a difference. So I don't, there is no defined answer on whether it works or not,
Wow. Okay.
which is interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's a couple different protocols that people follow. I'm just going kind of, and just, and you don't need, I do have on my website, if you go to mattzemon.com, there's a free guide to microdosing.
Okay.
But there's two main protocols. The Dr. Fadiman protocol says, okay, do it on day one. It's in your body on day two, let it out on day three, do it again on day four. Repeat that process for 4 weeks, and then take a 2 week break.
Hmm.
Paul Stamets, who's a famous
Yep.
mycologist, maybe you saw Fantastic
Yep.
Fungi. He says that's too complicated. Just do it 4 days in a row, take 3 days off, and then every 4 weeks, take a 2 week break. He goes a step further and says throw some lion's mane and some niacin in with that mushroom, and you can improve your memory and help with dexterity and all those kinds of good things. So that's what people microdose. So some people start with microdosing just to see what it feels like. And it's for them, it's a comfort. It's okay, I could do this and it wasn't too much. Others start with a larger dose and then use the microdosing as a way as scaffolding for the in-between
Mm,
times.
okay.
And because they've already developed a relationship, I'm going to use mushrooms as an example. They developed their relationship with psilocybin or mushrooms during the ceremony, and
Yep.
then they maintain the relationship using the microdosing afterwards. So there's no right or wrong place to start. It's wherever you're comfortable starting.
Okay. I love that.
Yeah. Pro tip: when you're first starting microdosing,
Yeah.
practice on a Saturday or a Sunday to figure out what your dosage is. It is not uncommon to take more than you expect and to feel more than you would ideally like to feel. And you want to do that where you have a very controlled environment and you don't have any responsibilities and you don't have any kids to drive anywhere or work meetings to have.
That's a good pro tip. I
Mm-hmm.
hope people for sure know because yeah, you're more like, let me just tell Melissa so she doesn't because
Doesn't overdose on it. And over the wrong word, doesn't take too much, then and feel too much, and then all of a
yeah,
sudden, yeah.
you're already on your way to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
oh my
Exactly.
gosh. Well, let me
Yes.
look at these other stuff because I really want to make sure, you really have some good questions on your sheets. So I want to see if there's anything we've really actually, you do a great job of covering a lot of different things in even in the conversation we've had so far. I feel like we've talked about um the medical treatment versus the ceremonies, which was kind of what you were saying that people want to be treated for such and such thing where the ceremonies are different. Or is there more
Yeah.
to
I
explore with
think
that topic?
no, I think with your audience, particularly, when you talk about the bright side of life, you talk about resilience and transformation.
Mm-hmm.
That feels to me more like people who are looking for spiritual change or spiritual connection and human optimization. And that is oftentimes found in these. I mean, there's 200 psychedelic churches in America. There's a beautiful practitioner in St. Louis. Um, there's a lot of 200, yeah, 200 churches, many, 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 many more practitioners.
What are churches? Like, what do you mean by that?
Literally religious institutions established in the state to that use entheogens or psychedelics as their sacraments.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's a couple that have been legalized by our government through lots and lots of lawsuits. There's a Native American church, and then there's a one that's essentially a Brazilian offshoot of the Catholic Church that uses ayahuasca.
Okay.
And then most churches don't file for what's called a religious exemption because the process is so onerous and it
Mhm.
doesn't, there's really no clear, the DEA has never granted an exemption without being sued, and there's all sorts of stuff.
Right.
But there are many, many churches. I think I would encourage people who are looking at doing this in a church model or doing this with an underground practitioner to ask some questions. And actually, these same questions are the ones that if you go to a ketamine clinic, I'd ask the same questions. I'd ask,
Mm.
um, what is your experience with the medicine? Have you personally experienced this medicine? What are you going to do to prepare me in advance for whatever journey you're going to give me? The journey itself, who's in the room with me? What's the music? What is the, am I laying down? Am I what's it going to feel like? Um, are there messages during the ceremony or the medical treatment? What are those? How long is this journey going to last? What happens after the journey? Um, what integration do we do together? Same questions, whether it's an above ground medical establishment or a below ground psychedelic practitioner, or even a psychedelic tourism. You're going to fly to Bahamas, Jamaica, Netherlands, Costa Rica, Peru. If you, same questions for those. How there's an ayahuasca center that I can think about that does 100 people at a time. There are others that do 10, 20, 40.
Right.
So
Right.
what are you getting yourself into? Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's at least you
Yeah.
have the information so that you can make the decision that feels right to you because you are a wise person and you know what you know in your gut what feels right for you.
Do you have a list of these questions somewhere
In my book, there's a book
in
on
your
yeah,
okay.
they're all over the book.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. Well, I
definitely
was
the
going to
book.
say if you don't, this would be a great thing to like have on your website for like a guide for people cuz I'm
That is a
like,
good. I'm making a note right now
yeah,
to add
cuz
that.
I'm like I would download that immediately to be like, okay, let me get out my thing that Matt said. These are all the questions I need to ask you.
I'm making a note to myself.
Yeah, I think that's cuz
I
I'm
will
like
have that on my website. I'm heading to retreat this week, but I will be back next week and I will work on that and get that up there.
perfect. Tell me what kind of retreat? Do you mind me asking you? Are you running it?
I help. There's a group that that creates a container where I help organize it, but then I don't deliver the medicine myself. We bring in people who are super experienced
Okay.
facilitators who have years and years and years of experience, and then they're the
Mhm.
ones really delivering the medicine. But I help with some of the administrative things to make those things possible.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love ceremony. We at the retreats that I typically work with, there are not only a male and female facilitator, but we have typically four musicians who create a custom soundtrack based on the energy of the room, and chefs who help create nourishing meals, and yoga and breath work and meditation. It's a beautiful experience.
That sounds awesome. That sounds really cool.
They are
Now,
yeah, they're good.
will you do you like will you do anything while you're there in terms of like taking the medicine or are you just there to do the work? I don't really know how that
It's
works.
both. Yeah, yeah, it's both. It depends on the ceremony. There are times when I
Okay.
will go down and just be a sitter and just
Hmm.
help if somebody needs help going to the restroom, needs a water bottle filled, needs a blanket, needs just a and just put positive energy into the world. And then there are other
Yeah.
times when I'm there as a participant. So it just depends on the ceremony.
I think it would be really cool. You just said the word sitter. Like I think after I would do like an experience, it would be so cool to like watch other people to see what happens, what comes up. Um,
It's
now that we're on that
beautiful.
topic,
Mm.
yeah, is there anything that like a story that stands out to you of somebody that had an experience, kind of like one that you said like with your mom? I know everybody has stories, but one that you were just like, this is so cool that this person got to get to that whatever conclusion.
Oh, it's every time, Melissa. I mean, it is you I don't see how it's possible to sit in one of these ceremonies and not understand how sacred and how spiritual this is. And every time people have breakthroughs that are just beautiful. It's also why I really do encourage people to I think group work is the better way for, sorry, if you have severe depression and or suicidal ideation and you need a private space, okay, I get that. But
Okay.
for most people, the group ceremonies are the way to go.
Okay.
There's an energy in the room that is shared. There's an attention that's shared. If you are releasing, Melissa, and I'm not, maybe I'm breathing to help you, remind you to breathe, and vice versa. We talk about my healing is your healing is my healing. So maybe afterwards, you talk about some connection that you made in your mind during the ceremony
Hmm.
that was impactful to you, and that triggers something else in me. Um, So I think community is, and also in indigenous cultures and such, this was always a part of the community.
Right.
So I just think that is a powerful way to do this, and to have both a shared experience and then to emerge with fellow travelers that you can forever be connected to,
Yeah. Even for your first time?
even for your first time, especially for your first time, even more
Oh,
so for your first time.
okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's really nice to go in as a first time participant with others that have with other first time participants and others who have great experience.
Right.
Every journey is different, but the going into a safe container is the most important part of this process.
Yeah. And then for the ceremonies, you do have people that are 100% sober if something would happen,
Of
right?
course.
Like
Yep.
to like you said, get okay. Now we got to talk afterwards to figure out stuff maybe in St. Louis that you know about.
It is funny how the universe opens up as when you start asking questions. And I would say that to your listeners, if your listeners still listening to this podcast this many minutes in, what are you thinking about, listener? What is it that's calling you, and how do you actualize that? But it's
Yeah.
all possible.
Yeah. And here's I've also had a really, really powerful experience with meditation
Hmm.
one time. And I know I don't want to say that they're but that's you meditate to expand your consciousness and whatever like comes up for you. So that's why I know how powerful meditation is. So that's why I want to see this and see what that means. I want to
Yeah,
know
it's
the similarities too and the differences.
it is wild. I mean, once I didn't know before psychedelics that I could meditate and pull myself out of my body. I didn't know before psychedelics that I could meditate and have energy come out of my hands. I've seen both those things happen now
Yep.
post. Other people, I mean, we get people who are 20, 30-year meditators who come in for their first psychedelic experience, and it's a really great skill set to bring to a psychedelic ceremony.
Mm, that's it. When you say, okay, so are you meditating while you're tripping?
In many ways, yeah. I mean, you start the process typically with just being very aware of your breath, being very aware of your intentionality of the room.
Okay.
Um, you're then breathing and surrendering into the medicine. And part of that in the beginning, as the medicine's coming on, is again just awareness.
Right.
During the actual peak experience, no, you're on your own journey. You're not, but as you're coming out, you're brought back into this awareness, and yeah, it's the ability to understand what awareness is pretty tremendous with psychedelics.
Well, that's what I'm excited for because when I had my experience with meditation and I literally felt spirit inside me,
Mm,
moving my body, I
kind
had
of wild.
never experienced anything like that ever. And that
Hmm.
was the moment that I'm like, okay, well, I can no longer argue that there is nothing greater than me because that's not me doing it.
Yep.
I know it's not. Like this is literally I am energy. Something was coming up and it was beautiful. Like it was so damn cool, you
When
know?
was this? That sounds beautiful. When was it?
This was like probably about 3 months ago.
Oh,
Um
recently. And were you meditating
yeah,
by yourself or in a group?
meditating by myself right back there on my bed. I was doing a Joe Dispenza,
Yep.
activating the I always pineal gland.
Pineal glands. Yep.
Yeah, so I was like 45 minutes in and then all of a sudden my head just starts going like this. And like my eyes are closed, but I know my head's moving and I'm like, I'm not doing this. I didn't, I wasn't, I was just like, this is amazing. And then it just kept happening. I would meditate the next morning and like 2 minutes in, it's happening. And I'm like, holy crap, this is like really cool.
That is awesome. That I know he does really great work when it comes to getting people to have these types of breakthroughs
Yeah.
with meditations. Very cool that you've experienced that.
Yeah, definitely. It's awesome. And, I haven't in the last couple, I've meditated a couple times, but I mean, I was doing it like in the morning. I was doing it
Mm-hmm.
at night, because I
It
just know
changes
there's
your
so
whole
many.
day
It really
when you do.
does.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
I think the biggest benefit for me was staying in the present and not worrying about everything in the past. I'm like, okay, this hour has seemed like it's been like 3 hours, but in a good way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I haven't just thought it away or obsessed about the past. Anyways,
I think we all do that. We either live in a past that's not real, or we live in a future that's not real.
yes,
And it's to find that ability to live in the present is such a treat, such a gift.
it
And I
really
think
is.
this technology really opens up what that can feel like. And again, it then becomes a practice. And we do we do great, and then we slip, and we do great, and we
Yep.
slip, and that's okay.
Yep.
It's
That's
all
so
part of the
true.
practice.
Yeah. Well, we have talked for almost an hour, but, and I might be asking a question at the wrong time, but to kind of wrap this up in a pretty bow, I know one of your topics was just like reclaiming your true self with psychedelics.
Mhm.
And maybe you have already said a little bit about it, but like, what do you feel psychedelics can really do for somebody that maybe does feel lost in the world? Maybe they don't know themselves that much or they thought they did. What do you mean by reclaiming your true self?
It's a deep question, Melissa. I'm gonna take it a couple different angles.
Okay.
First, as we get older, we get into repetitive thinking patterns. Literally,
Literally.
we are paring down our neural connections, and we are thinking literally the same way. When you take a psychedelic, it relights up your neural pathways, and you are able to remember, for lack of a better word, how you used to think, and to remember that the way you're thinking now is not the only way to think, and that can be incredibly powerful for people.
Yep.
Second thing that happens is your default mode network. It's the central part of your brain that's kind of, think of it as your inner narrator.
Okay.
It quiets that down. So the inner narrator is always saying, "You're not enough," or "Look what you did in the past," or "You're not good enough," or shame, or doubts, or blame. It quiets that down, and that's incredibly freeing. It feels like and for some people, like the weight of the world's lifted off their shoulders. Um, so when you have those two things happen together, it's like, okay, you can actually look at past events differently because you're not reacting emotionally. You're just looking at it. So the example I give is I talked about when I was an early teen having inappropriate sexual contact with a family member 10 years older.
Hmm.
And I was mortified. And it's something I buried away and didn't like to I'd never talked about it. And
Hmm.
on a journey, I re I was right back there, which is not what I wanted to do at all.
Right.
And I was able to look at it and say, okay, well, this is without forgiving or condoning, is that probably the better word, without condoning. I could
Hmm.
look at this person, like, okay, well, she was experiencing substance use challenges. She had been rejected from her father. She was not as smart or as pretty as her brother. She was had all sorts of things that she was experiencing, and again, not condoning,
Right.
but I could understand the actions. I could
Yeah.
understand the want for love. I could understand the want for touch. I could understand myself as an early teenager that this wasn't just, I wasn't the adult in the room.
Hmm.
And I could let it go. And for decades, it's something I was shamed and
Right.
super powerful. So when I think about reclaiming yourself, it's those items I think that come up first. This connection with, I think, this spiritual power that I'm not just on a short trajectory. That's powerful. And the yeah, and that I am enough. I am
Mm.
not I am enough, and I'm beautiful, and I'm loved, and so are you, and so are all of us travelers. That it's yeah, that I don't need someone else to tell me that. And that's been freeing because I've done so many things in my life to get other people's approval, including it's
Yep.
starting with my parents.
Yep.
Um, and even with them gone, I still do things to win their approval. And yeah, and I don't need to do that. So all of that goes into the reclaiming your true self. I think this technology, and again, there are safety things, and we've talked about that. It's not for
Mm,
everyone.
right,
Get a medical consult, but for many people, this technology, these sacraments, this drugs, this medicine, pick your language,
right.
so powerful.
Oh, well, I'm ready to go.
Well, I think you might have been ready to go before we even hopped on this call, but that's okay. This is I am
Yeah,
glad we connected today, Melissa, and this was a beautiful conversation. And I'm excited to see how your journey unfolds from here. It sounds like you've been on quite the journey already. So what, your daughter's
I have
22,
21. Just
21.
turned 21.
Congratulations.
Thank you. She's beautiful. She's
Yeah,
such a wonderful woman. Like, I just could not be more proud and of like the person she turned out to be. I'm very, very proud of
amazing.
that. Yeah, for sure. For
It
sure.
sounds like you
So,
worked very hard to do everything you can to make sure that she could
yeah.
emerge as this 21-year-old beautiful woman.
Yeah. And I think so much of what I have instilled in her is what my mom did for me. And I'm so happy to see that, like, what my mom did for me, I was able to pass it on, just being
Hmm.
respectful and, not judgmental of people. Like, we never came from money. So it's like, why would I ever think I'm better than people? Um, I don't know, just really good, like, values that I'm glad that she has. So yeah, I'm happy. Why don't you tell people about your book and where they can find it and your website so people can connect with you?
Perfect. So mattzeman.com is the website. I
Perfect.
do anyone who fills out a form or puts in questions, I respond to all of them. Oftentimes it's let's set up a call and talk.
Okay.
Especially if depending on I prefer if the question is complicated, just put in there, can we have a time to talk? And that's fine.
Yeah.
The book is Psychedelics for Everyone. It's available everywhere books are sold. There's also an Audible version for those who don't like to read and want something read to them. I read all the parts I wrote. I have a woman narrator read all the parts that women wrote. The book has been medically reviewed every chapter for accuracy. So hopefully it's content you can trust. And then I also have a book called Beyond the Trip, which is a journal. So if you're going, whether you're going to a ketamine clinic or to some ceremonial retreat, this type of journal can help you in that process. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and just again, happy to help anybody that has questions any way I can. Might take me a minute to get back to you, but I will get back to you.
You will. Perfect. Well, this conversation has been incredible. And I have a surprise question for you that I ask all of my guests at the end of the episodes. So, Matt, in your own words, what does the bright side of life mean to you?
Oh, I think the bright side of life is when we open our eyes and we are actually able to see the life that we have right this second, all of us. Um, it's so beautiful. We live in this abundant world and we're raised in a scarcity society, so we often don't see it, but it's here. It's all around us.
Yep. Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you. I love these little reminders all the time of like when I ask my guests, that question and how they see it. I just love people's answers. So thank you so much.
Melissa, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, it has.